Yeah, he's proud of all his kids. I'm one of four, so.
I am aware. I think the I said that in a very conniving way. Oh, I know. I got to see your show, the Multitude
Oh, you
show.
did? Okay, great.
How long ago was that now? Maybe 2 years ago.
Almost 2 years ago, or maybe a year and a half ago, that it was in Toronto. Because it was bookmarked kind of. We began it in the spring of 2021, I guess. And no, 2020. And ended it about a year ago now is when the tour ended. It was about a year that we were out on the road with that.
I think I saw the first one or the second one.
Well, in Toronto, probably. But before that, we developed it in Germany.
Right.
And because who else is going to give us access to a theater for a month and say, get experimental?
I mean, it was really quite experimental. I remember for people who weren't there and who weren't lucky enough to be there, we were all kind of sitting in a big circle around you, and you were facing the audience, like my side of the audience at times, and then you were facing the other side of the audience at times. And then there were moments where I was like, oh, I get it. This is going to be an intimate Feist concert where she moves around the room and sings to each of us, you know? And then then there was like a camera shows up and I go, oh, I get it. There's going to be like some cameras of us watching the Feist show and what we're doing. And then I started to realize that what I was watching wasn't actually happening in the room anymore. And then next thing you know, the curtain comes up and I'm on the stage with you, looking out at an empty.
Spoiler, I guess it's over though.
I'm worried about spoiling it, but I think it's over, so I can do it.
Yes, that was of a very specific time. That can't happen again. It won't ever happen again. It's kind of lovely to know that it was like catching this rare moment when those types of rooms, those like beautiful grand opera houses, needed to have very few people in them, and we got a chance to do something. Also, when people hadn't been physically moved by volume in a long time. They hadn't been next to other people in that type of proximity in a long time. So it was strangely the freshest way a concert could possibly feel, because it was capturing this particular moment where everyone was sort of, coming back new again to something that they didn't think could be new again.
It was my first,
me included.
It was my first show back since the beginning of the pandemic. That was the first thing I went to. You say me included. What did it give you?
It's funny because this was all done so backwards. The record's coming out, but normally that's at the beginning of things. But the songs were written for this tour, and then the tour was it lasted about a year, and then I waited a second and then made the record, and now here we are. You know what I mean? So it was sort of reverse engineered. It was like this inductive process of writing the songs for the production, and the production I knew was going to be in the round, and that it would be in a sort of a surround sound scenario. And given just that basic information, I knew I didn't want to sing old songs.
Why?
Well, because this was probably 6 months into lockdown, and 4 months before lockdown, I'd become a mom.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But it was a particularly challenging time, and I felt pretty unfamiliar to myself, and maybe songwriting being a way that I've used in the past to locate myself, maybe in the fog, when you can't see your hand in front of you kind of thing. It's just like you're in some obscured state of mind, some experience where you're a bit lost. I've often used songs to locate myself.
There are people who have told me that when they had kids, it's impossible. In fact, I just had an interview where someone told me.
I know exactly who you spoke to.
Yeah. Where it was Hayden, and Hayden had told me that being a parent and he's not the only person. Other people have told me that.
Of course,
becoming a parent, you try to find these like wee hours at 11:30 after everyone's gone to bed to maybe sit down and hope some inspiration finds you. So it's hard to write songs. You're saying that because you had a kid a couple of months before lockdown, and then you were sort of like learning who you were, learning who this child was, learning what your new role was going to be. At the same time, you found that writing songs helped you. It was like a sail for you.
It was a North Star, or at least a compass point that I could understand. It was sort of, I've joked that the person who decided to become a parent should probably still be around to parent this child. You know what I mean?
What do you mean?
Well, it changes you so much, and
The person who made the decision to have a child
Yeah.
should be there with
I'm
the child.
speaking about her in third person because almost unrecognizable former self decided to become a parent. You know,
Yeah.
it's like this person with this sort of endless, nauseating freedom. this, just like an autonomy beyond measure. Just like hours upon hours of time to sit around and wonder what's up inside of me, and that is gone. And so, interestingly, her North Star was to become a mother, and then I did. But it's a crucible. It's just and an old friend of mine, a photographer from New York named Casper. I want to credit her because it just was such an important thing she told me, because she's kind of got this sparkly-eyed wisdom about, maybe saying the thing that no one's saying. Is she's like, oh, being a parent will incinerate you. But the person who rises from those ashes is someone that you're going to be more interested to be for the rest of your life. She's going to serve you. Whatever happens, you just have to hand yourself over to this utter transformation. And so, writing songs is a way that I have often used in times that I've probably experienced as just as challenging, but in retrospect, I can see weren't.
Yeah.
And then I was able to bring that relationship to my kind of, I guess it's it's a very liquidy infrastructure in there. It's malleable and mutable. It changes, but it still holds me up. That's sort of it's the way I make sense of my the Rubik's Cube that is never going to be solved, of how I approach the problems that face me and whether I make them worse or better. Basically, I suppose is the maybe the aspiration. And if I can contain inside a song a particular, the Rubik's Cube is like that many stripes of blue and that many stripes of white. And, it's a puzzle that's been solved this far. And if I can put something in that container of a song that gives me a few clues, I can plant them for myself. I say as if there's plural future selves.
Yeah, there was a plural past self.
Exactly. I mean, it's a problem I can continue solving for the next 40 years. And I have had that happen with songs from the past. And that's why I know that it's something that if I do it with more intention now, I can continue to try to solve problems for the next 40 years,
I heard you say this thing about having your kid, that it was like a spiritual smallification. What does that mean?
I don't recall, but I love it.
You did say it. I mean, I heard you say it.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I suppose because it's life is sort of reduced. It's expanded, but it contracts down to these minutiae, these little doings. Someone once said we're human beings, not human doings. If we can approach the doing of things with the way to be during the doing of those things, then that might be a clue there. It's sort of the smallification. If it's instead of looking at it like, oh my God, I'm all I do now is this series of tiny things, but they were all imbibed with this. Some deeper meaning. I mean, this is now the fostering of a life, is the keeping alive of a brand new being on this earth. Maybe teaching her how to be here.
I understand that. It seems to me that, like, if I understand this correctly, playing Saturday Night Live, touring to big old theaters and arenas. These are big things to do. These are big things to do. Mounting a big tour, going to Germany and developing a stage show, doing that stage show. These are all really, really big things to do. Preparing noodles, loading some time-lapse videos on an iPad, getting a set of pajamas. These are smaller things to do, but they are imbued with a deeper meaning, so they're more powerful.
I mean, I like that I said that at some point, and I'm trying to wonder at what point did I feel the spirituals inside the smallification, because it is there's a relentlessness to the care of a being, and I often have felt unqualified for it. I mean,
Really?
it's very, very, very taxing, but it's a privilege, and if at the moment when I said that, which whenever that was, I might have been a little bit more in touch with the privilege part rather than the exhaustion part. I mean, it blows my mind that humanity has been based upon this all along, and I just didn't know it. I mean, this servitude and this sort of ever-present availability to the becoming of someone, to sort of like, here's what you do, here's how you walk, here's how you talk, here's how we're kind, here's how we're present, here's how we, if you're strong, use your strength in service of others. I mean, these basic things, it's you can lose track of them inside of the just utter depletion too,
Is that what Forever Before on the record is about?
Yes.
Talk to me a little bit about that song.
Well, actually, that is sort of it's a study on the state of mind that I can recall, sort of the Rorschach test of like the immediate past and the immediate future. It's sort of like, here I am in the spine of the book. I'm in the present here. And the person and the present being the large form question of what it is to focus my entirety on the offering of myself as a mother to a little person, and the person before maybe identified love as something I receive, maybe, it was something that I was looking to receive. And the lesson of becoming a mother is that love is equally the thing that you can offer. I mean, it's the same function. It's the giving and the taking. And that song sort of studies, maybe my misidentification of the quality of love that I was looking to tap into. And then identifying it as something where, I mean, the phrase, I've never begun a forever before. It's sort of, I have committed to things before, but I've done it sort of laterally. And I've sort of backed in and check it out,
keeping your
dip
options
your
open.
toe. Yeah,
Yeah,
you just want to
sure.
make sure that this, or I mean, committing to get on a plane at 5 a.m. to show up somewhere to do something that's going to be hard when I get there, but it was me that decided to do it, or, those sorts of temporary commitment. You know what I mean? It's a commitment for this week. I'm going to really hold it together and get this thing done or whatever. But the forever of becoming a parent, that's where. So she's definitely in there. It's my love song to my commitment to her.
At the same time, and I only talk about this as much as you want to. At the same time, I think that was happening was around the same time you lost your dad, right?
Well, there was, thank goodness, there was maybe a year and a half between.
He got to
her arriving and him leaving.
He got to spend some time with her.
Yes, and the pandemic being its double-edged sword. I mean, it offered people, an opportunity to look at things in a way they hadn't, which is, that was either a good thing or a win or a painful, confused, loss of a former self. But it offered me a stillness that I hadn't had in years and years, or I hadn't wanted. I hadn't really stayed still in a long time.
No.
So
you were able to have some time where
and we came home. We were with my dad. We potted with him. We were, it was quite something to see him with my daughter, and I have tons of video. And you just, it's a gift to not know. You never know, basically.
He was an artist, right?
He's a painter, yeah. An abstract expressionist painter, and someone I'd seen committed to his work his whole life, and it's a private practice he had in that sense. I mean, it's sort of, in a way, songwriting. I was lucky enough to speak craft with him over the years, but in the way that different genres can speak to each other when you pull way back, you can talk about, where you're compelled from or what you're after, but the function of it or what makes something good or bad, I can't speak to painting in that way. And songs, it's all about this sort of, the kaleidoscope of taste, whether you like something or you feel something or not. So right or wrong, good or bad didn't really come into how we could discuss what we each do, but it was a gift.
Did he give you any guidance in your art practice?
I mean, I can't find any clear message from him, except that I watched him show up to his canvas since I can remember. He just showed up, and he just continued to work with his own vocabulary, with his own, the people he would probably call the closer counsel, and I have done the same. So I would say there's an echo there, but not one that we would often refer to, because they didn't look much alike.
Sure, but at least you didn't have the dad going like, I don't know about this arts, I don't
Yeah,
know
no.
about this arts thing, like, are you sure you don't want to get your pharmaceutical degree or something like that?
Well, he used to, yeah, right. No, luckily, no. He used to be a teacher. He taught art. And I think the only joke was, as long as you're not a painter, it'll be fine. I don't know why.
Well, he must have been very proud of you.
I think, yeah, quietly so. But yeah, he's proud of all his kids. I'm one of 4. So.
I am aware. I think the I said that in a very conniving way. Oh, I know. Believe me.
They look out their kitchen window. They're like,
yeah, where do you think
Tom doing
Where
here?
do you think I heard the spiritual smallification? Hiding outside the window. I wanted to ask you a little bit about collaboration. Given that you just mentioned, like, you sort of keep people close to you and a certain sort of cadre of people close to you. I think when I look back on those sort of early days of the way people talk about your career, there was so much collaboration. There was the Peaches, the work with Peaches. There was the guitar by Divine Right. There was a Broken Social Scene. I mean, so many things that I'm sure I don't even know about. I guess my question was that an intentional? Did you want to collaborate with people, or was it just you were just sort of part of a scene?
I'd say that began so early. Well, for the first 5 years, I was in a band and in Calgary, and that band we were a kind of a closed circle, and we did our thing, and we wrote our songs and made our recordings and stuff, and played in a scene with other bands. But it wasn't like we were all interchangeable. It wasn't like we were playing in other bands, really. But coming to Toronto and leaving the kind of the nest, the safety of that hermetically sealed sort of unit, the feeling of like, it's like, someone once told me that there's this famous Nick Cave visitation they had where he was walking with the Bad Seeds through some festival site, and just like, just kind of, it might as well have been in slow motion, just him and these guys, and they're all like, their jackets are flapping in slow motion, like that feeling of like,
it's us versus the world.
Yeah, that didn't exist when I first moved to Toronto. And, so people that I met, and I can trace it all back to Noah Mintz. I mean, Noah Mintz is the guy that asked me to, he'd seen my band Placebo from Calgary, and tracked me down by looking through the phone book in Calgary, or phoning information or something, who knows, and phoned my mom and said, hey, I want to ask your daughter, do you know I can track her down. I want to ask her to sing on a record. And this was, I had already moved to Toronto. I lived in my dad's basement, and I couldn't believe it. So she's like, oh, well, she moved to Toronto. And so Noah asked me to sing on his record, and then to play bass in his live band. And that led me to, he's sort of like ground zero in terms of everyone that I now know. It all comes back to, it's sort of a brand new life was beginning here. And he just he was the starter yeast for the entire life that I now live, And it was a bit of an interchangeable scene back then. There were things to be done, and people starting from scratch, and can you play guitar, and do you know how to play this, and what do you know, and I met this guy last week, let's do, So it was just sort of it might have just suited the time where I was trying to get my footing and figure out what I was doing, and but it is many lifetimes ago, so it's hard to really remember, but that was the vibe around Toronto. It could be the case now too. It's just I'm not tapped into it in the same way.
What do you remember about putting out the first record, the Let It Die record?
Oh wow,
it was such a big record for me, Leslie, and me and my friends, and
wow.
I
mean, it could have gone so many ways. At that moment, I had my foot on like 5 hinges that were all, I was getting invited to go over to Europe and back up Peaches, who I had lived with here, and she'd put her roots down in Berlin and was sending me, paper ticket, like back in the day, to go get on a plane and go do shows with her. Gonzo had moved, Jolie Gonzalez had moved. But then Broken Social Scene was starting here, and I was part of that original. I think there were 6 of us that started Broken Social Scene, and the first winter before You Forgot It and People was made, and we were just gigging at like TEDs and stuff. So there were roots down in that way too. And I had been making my demos. I lived with Chris Murphy, my first boyfriend, from Sloan, and had a 4-track and his computer, and I had been making all these early demos, and And so taking those demos to sort of my crew over here, Broken Social Scene, or taking those demos overseas, and what am I going to do? What is this? Is this a record? I don't know really what I'm doing. And then it just so happened I started to tour more and more with Chili Gonzalez. And on days off in between tour, he had met a producer in Paris named Renaud Letang, and they wanted to work together and see what they could be as a production team. And I just became kind of the subject matter of their experiment of being a production team. And I'd never worked in a proper recording studio before. I'd never had a producer. I'm like, what's that? Oh, is that the guy that plugs stuff in? Like, no, I didn't know.
Yeah.
And so we recorded that and days off on Gonzo dates. And it slowly became apparent that it was a record. And they were also all covers. I was like, if this is an experiment, then I'm not giving my songs that I care about into this weird experiment.
So originally it was like that Bee Gees cover,
Yeah.
the Inside and Out, and the Ron Sexsmith cover, The Secret Heart. And
I think I might have brought that in there was we did Look of Love. We did a weird Stevie Wonder cover.
Do these exist?
I hope not.
I asked all your siblings and they didn't have it.
I went through all the boxes in the basement.
Yeah, so sure. It's called journalism. So you went and you had done that stuff, but then you eventually, okay, I'm going to bring my own songs.
Yeah, and then I thought, okay, well, if we're going to do this, this is cool. I'd gotten my bearings in a studio, looked not unlike this, somewhere a very official feeling, and I hadn't come from that world. So it kind of happened. Maybe that's one of those commitments that I just sort of backed into. I didn't know that I was making Let It Die. And then because Gonzo's so well loved in Europe, and Renaud Letang, little did I know he had made a bunch of records, beloved records, that it was just a strange opportunity where just those two guys, word got around like these two are working with this Canadian.
Yeah.
And and so somehow I got a record deal. It was just so strange, and based in France, and it's still alive now. That's a 20-year deep record deal that I've had based in France this whole time. And it was just the greatest luck ever.
I mean, what a beautiful record. And it was the record that made me sort of fall in love with your music. And I was telling one of our producers here, just like, I didn't know, to me, that was all I needed. I just needed that. I needed Gatekeeper, and I needed Bush Boom, and I needed, I loved those. I mean, I think I was 19. So like really
That's so
formative
cool.
stuff for me. And then I watched an interview last night when I was getting ready to talk to you, normal research with, but it was an interview that I think it was George Stroumboulopoulos was doing with you kind of when 1, 2, 3, 4 happened, right when you got in the iPod commercial. And and he said something to you like, how does it feel to be in this moment right now? And you said, I'm sort of shielding myself from this moment right now. Like the world is all sort of happening to me right now, but I need a sort of a self-protective way to shield myself from it. For people who don't know, I mean, when 1, 2, 3, 4 gets in that Apple commercial, everything kind of blows up after that, And now I think with a bit of distance, I can ask the question again. Now that we're able to look back on it a little bit, what was that time like? It's a rare thing.
It's so funny because I'm trying to find that feeling in the memory, and I'm loving the wisdom of that younger self, because it was overwhelming. And I suppose had I not already been on the road for so many years, or hadn't already made many records with different friends, or had that band, that feeling of belonging somewhere, getting signed to a label and looking at it truly like, I am grateful for someone to help me now. That's how I looked at being on a major label. It was, oh my God, I don't have to poster for my own shows anymore. Someone's going to help me book some shows, so I don't have to do it all. Like I had done it myself for so long that I think that all served me to understand that that moment, I knew how to meet it. I knew how to work it. Like how to work, like Clydesdale style, show up to the job and be able to carry this extra stuff that was getting hoisted on my back and carry it. But at the same time, there was momentum to it, and it felt a little wild and out of control, and very like more than a human body could like sustain. It was was
it hard to sustain?
It was just like kind of, if I think I said no to many things that I since have sort of thought, geez, that would have been cool to do.
Like what? Can you tell me one?
Oh, no, because it's sort of that classic thing of like, well, you didn't do it, so so it's sort of like, no, I swear they invited me, but no, but but yeah, it was sort of G-force and not entirely pleasant. And eventually, I think it felt good to say, like, okay, by no metric will anyone say I didn't show up to this moment and do my best and do my darndest, but I just need to take a breather now. So to think even in the thick of it, I was like feeling, luckily inside, as I say, I made a shield around me. In here, there were like incredible friends. There was, Robbie Lackritz, who I still work with. There was my band at the time. We had that kind of bad seeds feel. We were like we could show up and do what was asked of us. But it was it was something to have, like, be glad you made it to the other side, sort of.
Have you ever heard that Neil Young quote where he said, "I found that I was going towards the mainstream, so I swung towards the ditch."
Oh, cool.
Isn't that cool?
I've never heard that.
I found like I was driving in the mainstream, so I pulled the car into the ditch.
That's so cool.
I
mean, he made the ditch into the mainstream then, I suppose.
I guess so. But did having that massive success impact the rest of the music you made from then on?
I took enough time after The Reminder, and and Let It Die had come out, and I toured it and recorded The Reminder while, on the road pretty much. Just whenever there was a month or a week or whatever. And so then it was sort of like I just kept touring, but I was touring Let It Die, and then from Tuesday to Wednesday, now the Reminder's out, and now I'm touring that. So it was sort of like, it was kind of like 8 years or something.
Yeah.
It was sort of like it was 2002 to 2009. So like 6 years. Okay, fine.
Yeah. I wasn't gonna say anything.
8. Wait, 6. What's 9 minus 2? 7.
Listen, it's a songwriter and a banjo player trying to do math. Hey, Leslie, don't stress out about it too much here.
We can only count in fours,
yeah,
right?
Exactly. Very good. Fantastic.
We'll jam sometime and we'll try to play a something swung, but
it's not going to happen. I guess, but you know what I'm asking? I think sometimes there's an effort to replicate.
Right. No, it was
ching, ching, ching. Are you like, okay, I gotta move on.
I would say it was a joking moratorium on glockenspiel and tambourine, and it was that all that stuff was of a moment, and then the moment had passed, and I was somewhere very different, and then I took a deep breath, and a couple of years after that to try to remember what living was about, and be in one place, kind of, and when it came time to write again, it wasn't so much intentionally turning away from or trying to replicate or be other than. It was just I feel like I answered the new moment. It might be in a way my first record, The Metals, because it was my first true intention to, like I keep talking about, locating myself inside of this moment, and then what is, if this moment is a moment where I don't really know up from down, then how do you characterize the not knowing and turn it into something that I can offer my future self, or the headphones of someone walking in the rain, and so it was, maybe I was sonically craving different things, or I was, sometimes what can happen after 100 shows, I'll notice myself humming songs or kind of looking for new melodies that are somewhere else in my range. Because if I've been singing in a certain range, it's like painting with the same 9 colors or something. Now I just want, all of me is craving something else. And so I think I wrote the else, I wrote to the something else that I was craving. And then in a way that became kind of the beginning of me knowing that that's what songwriting might be for me.
I think what you said about Neil Young there reminds me of sort of the feeling I had while I was listening to this record and to Metals, but to this record in particular, is that rather than like trying to find us with your art, you sort of make art and bring us to it. Do you know what I mean by that? Like you sort of are uncompromising with the art that you want to make, but find a path for me to come to it.
If that happens, I would be grateful, because I think that might be, no presuming anyone will want to come, but I do know that I have nothing to offer unless I'm offering where I'm at. I don't really, the zeitgeist is this, it's like quicksilver. It's just moving all the time.
Yeah.
There's no
and you
catching
were in it.
it.
Like you were in it.
Well, and I maybe I can remember, I can squint and remember there was a second there,
Hmm.
in some Canadian form, it was it was yeah, I can remember a moment of being sort of in that uh thing that you don't know it until it's too late to identify. Oh,
Yeah,
that what was that,
yeah.
And and I think that yeah, I don't know. I really feel that songwriting is sort of how to contain an aspiration um, and maybe look with the least amount of rose colored, dark colored, half full, half empty, all the filters that you might look at your own problems at to lift them away, at least for just the container of 3.5 minutes, and find something maybe a little more essential that will serve me later.
Yeah.
So it's like the least harmful, selfish um, endeavor, I'd say.
I'm appreciative that I get a path to it. You
I
know.
would appreciate that too.
Yeah.
I mean, I often feel that a friend of mine, well, Jason Collette just wrote me that he was listening to the record in headphones on rainy dog walks, and
Hmm.
I said, "That's the gift. If that's where you've been and you've found yourself going back a couple times, then you just made my album release for me because all I'd want is if one person has a headphone experience and it's I think that's a gift. It's like my privacy and his privacy hung for a second, and they never will. Because when you're alone with yourself, there's a reason why you're alone there. It's an interior vocabulary that doesn't maybe have words. And then songs can kind of characterize that
Yeah.
or help reach it, just push it out of me. So it's like maybe here, and then if your equivalent comes and there's a Venn diagram of kind of common experience, or mutually alone but mutually find an understanding of something that otherwise seems so unsolvable, then I, I think that's just, I'm so grateful that my job touches that at all.
I love my privacy, and his privacy hung for a little while. That's beautiful. Leslie, thanks for coming in.
Thank you. Thanks for having
I
me.
love talking to you.